I don't think you can understate the importance of the consensus that has emerged on what security sector reform is and what security sector reform looks like. This is kind of a rehash of that definition. I'll read it because they're kind of hard to read. Security sector reform is the set of policies, plans, programs, and activities that a government undertakes to improve the way it provides safety, security, and justice. The overall objective is to provide an effective and legitimate public service that's transparent, accountable to civilian authority, and responsive to the needs of the public. Not the needs of the regime, not the needs of the state, the needs of the people. The broad agreement on this as a defining structure for what security sector reform is, to me, represents one of the most important elements of progress in developing the concept as an operational basis for practitioners like us. The strength of the way it has been defined, and again, I'll go back to a point that Dr. Briggity made about the importance of comprehensive approaches. Security sector reform from its inception has been neither defense nor military centric. It has emphasized all of the elements of the security sector, both the guys with guns, that's the one at the top there, okay, and the folks who are supposed to give those guys with guns orders and make sure that they're doing what we, the people, want them to do. And finally, all of those folks that are not part of the government, like bar associations and the press and human rights groups, that are private but which play a role in making sure this system works the way it is supposed to. One of the strengths of security sector reform is its comprehensive nature, and I would have to say, in Africa, what I have seen is a much more comprehensive view of security sector reform than I have tended to see amongst your Western partners, to include the United States government. United States, Europe are still kind of rooted in a Cold War model where defense and military are sort of the first among equals. And of course, people will tell you, oh, no, that's not true, that's not true. Come on, you guys can read. All you got to do is look at the budget for the United States government and answer that one. In Africa, alternatively, from the very beginning of ACSS, we have typically seen police officers at the table, gendarmerie at the table, customs, immigration at the table, much more so than is the case on the part of your partners. In that respect, you are leading the way, and I would encourage you to do so. I would add the folks who are not at the table, for you or for us, are the justice system and rule of law guys. They are not here, and they need to be here. They need to be part of these debates. Okay. I am not going to waste any time on human security. You all understand that better than I do. The discussions that I've listened to in the last 3 days indicate that you are in the midst of dragging the system from the old traditional military security perspective to the new human security perspective, and I laud you for doing so, and I encourage you to continue that process. Whole of government, easier said than done. And why does it matter? Why do we care? Is this more than just, what do we mean by it, and is it more than just a slogan? You know, remember the observation, well, it's comprehensive and it involves all the different players. How can you prioritize if the different elements of the security sector are not only talking to the decision makers at the top, but talking to each other? When the military and the police are performing missions that are so intertwined, how can those institutions give informed advice to the elected officials and appointed officials over them without talking to each other, without sharing perspectives? And the same applies to all of the elements of the security sector. Everybody needs to be involved in the strategy and policy formulation stage, in providing informed advice to the senior political leadership of the country. That's very difficult to do informally. without some structure for bringing those various players to the table in an organized way and soliciting collective input from them. It is just as important, if not more so, for implementation. In an environment where increasingly police, customs, immigration, intelligence, armed forces, missions, roles, and operations overlap. Collaboration is the name of the game. One of the things that we've talked about in our groups is how do you deal with a situation where you have both a policing requirement and a military threat. And that gets to our second one, our last one, the military-police interface. My Nigerian colleague several years ago put this to me best when he said, look, Colonel Dempsey, you really don't get it. When cattle rustlers show up in Plateau State to steal cattle, there are several hundred of them, and they are driving technical vehicles with machine guns and mortars. And if I send my police to arrest them, they're just gonna kill my police. So what do? Do I just send in the military? This is one of the most critical issues confronting security sector reform today. And I would offer, again, to the extent that there are solutions to this, I do not think you're gonna hear those solutions from your American technical advisors or your British advisors or your French advisors. I think that to the extent there are solutions out there, they are solutions that you are going to find yourselves. And on that note, I wanted to add one more thing. Africa is the leading arena for security sector reform today. And some of the most critical lessons being learned in practice in security sector reform are being learned by you and your colleagues. And I think that it is incumbent upon you as part of the community of practice to share them with each other and to share them with us, to share them with the donors, to share them with the external actors, to share them with the rest of the world that does not have your experience in dealing with these intractable problems. Okay, what are we? We're about 35 minutes, okay. I'm not going to talk a lot to this slide. I'm just going to say that everybody talks about rule of form, rule of law. We talk about the justice system, but we have not adequately incorporated it into our security sector reform planning, concepts, programming, and implementation. We have to do a better job of that. Civil-military relations, how do you do that? And there are really two components of it. Dr. Matt talked about this yesterday, and he did a very, very good job. This is just some brief suggestions from what we've experienced in the community of practice. Building a culture of respect for civil authority, probably the most important thing that you can do. And when I say you are the mentors for the young men and women that are growing up in your governments and in your security services today. Your example influences those individuals more than anything I can do or say or that the donors will undertake. And that's something that I encourage you to think about. The power of personal example is tremendously important. And as you rise to the highest levels of your government, and most of you will, you're going to have an opportunity to display by your personal example what the relationship between senior military leaders on the one hand and elected and appointed civilian officials on the other should be, both in the context of the presidency and in the context, the executive branch, and in the context of Parliament. When your young civil servants and officers, your majors and lieutenant colonels, see the Chief of the Defense Forces speaking to Parliament in a deferential way, responding to questions from the parliamentarians, demonstrating his or her acceptance and belief in the role of Parliament as a vital member in security decision-making. When they see you having the same kind of conversation with the Minister of National Defense or his deputy, with the representative from the Office of the Prime Minister, that more than anything, I think, helps create a culture of respect for civil authority. This is particularly tough. Balancing the accountability of military commanders to both the executive and the legislative branch. Executive and legislative branch aren't always going to see eye to eye. Sometimes they're going to have different priorities. They're going to disagree about key decisions that influence the security services and the armed forces. The head of state's your commander-in-chief. To a very real degree, you serve his administration. So how do you deconflict that responsibility and the responsibility of loyalty to your superiors with your duty to inform the Parliament and to answer their questions and to offer objective technical advice about military issues? And, you know, offering technical advice, apolitical, nonpartisan, it always sounds good, right? But we all function at the strategic level. At least you all do. I'm a low-level munchkin. But you all function at the strategic level. And at the strategic level, everything is political. Anything the Chief of the Defense Forces says about difficult decisions regarding resourcing and prioritizing has political implications, political consequences, and political overtones. Sometimes you're going to be asked to testify to a hostile parliament controlled by the opposition, and you may be testifying about a topic that you and your head of state, your commander-in-chief, disagree about. He may have made a decision that you think from a professional perspective is wrong. And you're going to be sitting there in Parliament, and the chairman of the committee is going to ask you, General, what do you think about that? What's your opinion? What are you going to say? Are you going to publicly differ with the head of state, with your commander-in-chief? These are difficult questions. They're questions that I know you have already thought about. The officers and more junior civilian officials inside your governments and your militaries and your security sectors need to be thinking about them as well. And they need to be doing so with mentoring and leadership from you. Okay. Bless your heart. Thank you. Okay, I got 5 minutes left here. Okay, up. That's my relationship as a soldier to the elected and appointed officials over me. Kind of sideways is my relationship to the citizens that I'm supposed to serve. What's that relationship look like? What do they think of the military? What do I think of them? What do my soldiers think of them? What do Malian soldiers think about Tuaregs today? Interesting question. These are the other issues of civil-military relations. How do you foster an ethic of serve and protect among your military service members? And then, of course, the next question is, well, serve and protect who? I mean, you can say, well, the whole nation. But, you know, get down to the community level. Who are we really talking about here? Everybody in the nation? Different parts in the nation? How do all those people out there look at me as a soldier? How do they look at me individually? How do they look at the institution that I'm a part of? How do you build civilian respect for military service and service members? This is particularly challenging in environments where civilians have experienced brutal, predatory security services for an extended period, and that's their context. And that's not just in the countries that we each serve. If we're in a peace operation in some place like the Congo, how the Congolese people view guys with guns ought to matter to us. It certainly will matter to our soldiers and our police who are deployed in that environment. Okay, just a quick comment. Disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. It matters, it's important. SSR and DDR are inextricably linked, and if you do not view them together, we are likely to go down unsuccessful paths in both. External actors, just a quick observation here. When the UN has 14,000 troops in my country, and they're the guys who have the guns on every street corner, well, okay, who the hell's in charge here? Who's making decisions? Who's exercising sovereignty? How can I be a sovereign government if security is being provided by somebody from outside my country? And what should I do about that? This is broke. We haven't figured this one out. And whether you're looking at Liberia today, whether you're looking at the Democratic Republic of Congo, whether you're looking at Somalia, if we don't fix this one, we are going to have real problems. And by fix, we have to find a way to accommodate that kind of external military and security presence with effectively exercised sovereignty by an elected civilian government. I can't tell you the number of meetings that I've sat in on the U.S. government side with people developing recommendations about how we're going to fix the police in country X and how we're going to train them and what kind of assistance we're going to provide them. And you're looking around the table and there isn't a policeman in the group. You know, if I showed up in Afghanistan in the headquarters of the 101st Airborne Division and I said to the commander of the division, "Hey, General, I got this guy here. He's from Idaho, and he's a 17-year veteran of the police forces. You know, he's worked in the Boise Police Department, and he's got a little drug enforcement experience. I'd like him to take command of one of your air assault infantry battalions in combat." And the guy would look at me and say, what are you, nuts? But that's what we do with the police all the time. Hey, I got this smart Army colonel. I got this smart, Marine sergeant. And he's going to come down and help you train your police. Well, what the hell does he know about policing? Answer, nothing. If you want to fix the police, talk to the police. And on that note, I will conclude my remarks. Thank you for your patience.